Good evening, everyone. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever been in an argument where you knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that you were right? You had the facts, you had the logic, you had the better idea. And yet, no matter how much you explained, no matter how much you proved your point, the other person just wouldn't see it. Frustrating, isn't it? We spend so much time trying to convince people, convince them that our idea is the right one, convince them that our way is the better way, convince them to believe what we believe, and yet the more we push, the more they resist. The harder we try, the more they dig in. Why? Because people don't like to be convinced. Think about it. No one likes being told they're wrong. No one enjoys being backed into a corner. And no one ever changes their mind because someone else told them to. The moment we try to convince, we put ourselves in opposition. It's me versus you, my opinion against yours, my truth against your truth. Think about the last time someone tried to convince you of something you didn't already believe. Maybe it was a political debate, a sales pitch, or even just a friend telling you why their favorite restaurant is better than yours. What did you feel? Did you immediately change your mind? Probably not. More likely you felt resistance, even if their argument made sense. That's because human nature is wired against being pushed into a belief. The moment we feel someone trying to change our mind, we instinctively put up a wall. It's not just about logic, it's about emotion. When someone tries to convince us, it feels like they're imposing their perspective on us, as if our current beliefs are somehow wrong or insufficient. And nobody likes to feel that way. Convincing often triggers defensiveness, a psychological response that makes people double down on their existing beliefs, no matter how strong the counter-argument may be. This is why debates rarely end with one side saying, "You know what, you're right, I see things completely differently now." Instead, people walk away even more set in their views, frustrated that the other person didn't listen. In contrast, inspiration works in the exact opposite way. When someone inspires us, they don't push us into their way of thinking. They show us something that makes us feel like we want to move in that direction. It's not forceful. It's not about winning an argument. It's about creating a vision so compelling that we naturally lean in, not because we were convinced, but because we feel drawn to it. Inspiration works because it engages us emotionally, not just intellectually. Look at the greatest leaders, innovators, and movements throughout history. They didn't convince people to follow them, they inspired them. When Steve Jobs introduced the first iPhone, he didn't list all the technical specifications to prove it was the best phone on the market. He simply held it up and said, "This changes everything." He showed people a future they wanted to be part of. He didn't try to convince. He inspired curiosity, excitement, and a sense of possibility. Martin Luther King Jr. didn't stand in front of a crowd and list reasons why civil rights legislation needed to change. He didn't argue point by point against those who opposed him. Instead, he painted a picture of a world that was so powerful, so moving, that people couldn't help but want to be part of it. He didn't say, "Here's why you should believe what I believe." He said, "I have a dream." And that dream wasn't about proving someone wrong. It was about showing people a future they could believe in. It is the power of inspiration over persuasion. When we inspire, we don't put people on the defensive. We don't make them feel attacked. Instead, we invite them into a vision, a belief, a possibility that feels exciting and natural for them to step into. People want to be part of something meaningful, but they want to feel like it was their choice, not something forced upon them. Even in everyday life, this principle holds true. Think about the way we form our own opinions. When was the last time you changed your mind about something significant? Chances are it wasn't because someone argued with you until you gave in. It was likely because you were exposed to a new perspective, a story, or an idea that resonated with something inside you. You saw something that made sense, that felt right, and you shifted your thinking, not because you were convinced, but because you felt inspired to do so. This is why some of the most powerful brands, leaders, and movements don't rely on hard facts and aggressive persuasion. They know that belief is not something you force onto someone. It's something they must arrive at on their own. Instead of saying, "You should believe this," they say, "Here's something I believe. If you feel the same way, let's go." And that simple shift makes all the difference. When we stop trying to convince and start trying to inspire, we shift the way people engage with us. We stop creating resistance and we start creating alignment. People don't follow ideas because they were convinced. They follow ideas because they feel connected to them. Convincing creates opposition, while inspiration creates alignment. When we try to convince someone of something, we unknowingly set up a dynamic of conflict. It becomes me versus you, my idea versus yours, my way of thinking against what you already believe. The moment someone feels like they are being persuaded, their natural reaction is to defend their current position. It doesn't even matter if our argument is logical, well-structured, or backed by facts. The simple act of trying to push someone into agreement activates their resistance. This happens because people don't like feeling as if they are being forced into something. No one enjoys the sensation of being told they are wrong or that they need to change. It creates tension, and instead of listening, people become focused on proving why they are right. It stops being about understanding and turns into a battle of who can win the argument. This is why so many debates go in circles. Both sides are so focused on convincing the other that neither is truly open to shifting their own perspective. Inspiration, on the other hand, works in a completely different way. When we inspire, we don't force anyone to change their mind. Instead, we present an idea, a vision, or a perspective in a way that makes people feel drawn to it. There is no pressure, no demand. We simply share something that resonates, something that makes people want to lean in rather than push back. Inspiration doesn't challenge people, it invites them. Think about the difference between a great leader and a boss. A boss gives orders trying to convince their team to follow instructions because this is the way it should be done. A great leader, on the other hand, inspires people by showing them why something matters. They paint a picture of what's possible, making their team feel excited and motivated to be part of something bigger than themselves. The best teams aren't built on forced compliance. They are built on shared belief and excitement. Marketing works the same way. The most effective brands don't try to convince us to buy their products by bombarding us with reasons why they are the best. Instead, they tell stories that make us feel connected to their message. Nike doesn't try to convince us that their shoes have the best technology. They inspire us with the idea that anyone can be an athlete. Tesla doesn't just sell electric cars. They inspire us with the vision of a future where innovation and sustainability go hand in hand. In our personal lives, we see this dynamic play out constantly. Have you ever had someone try to change your mind about something you care deeply about? Maybe they listed facts, pointed out flaws in your logic, or tried to show you why their perspective was better. Did it work? Most likely, it made you want to dig in even deeper. But then, think about a time when you naturally changed your mind about something. Chances are it wasn't because someone convinced you. It was because you saw something, heard a story, or had an experience that made you feel differently. This is why inspiration creates alignment while convincing creates resistance. When we try to convince, we make people feel like they have to fight for their own ideas. But when we inspire, we make people feel like they are coming to their own conclusions. Instead of pushing, we create space for curiosity. Instead of arguing, we spark interest. Instead of making people feel like they are being challenged, we make them feel like they are part of something they want to belong to. Movements, revolutions, and cultural shifts don't happen because people were convinced through logical arguments. They happen because people feel a deep emotional connection to an idea that aligns with something they already believe or aspire to believe. This is why powerful storytelling is such an effective tool for change. Stories allow people to see themselves in a new perspective, not because they are being forced to, but because they naturally relate to the message being shared. The truth is, people don't change because they lose an argument. They change because something within them shifts. The best way to make that happen isn't by convincing, it's by showing them something so compelling that they want to move toward it on their own. When we stop trying to win people over and instead focus on sharing what truly matters to us, we stop creating conflict and start building connection. When we think about leadership, we often imagine someone standing in front of a crowd, delivering a powerful speech, making a compelling case for why people should follow them. But true leadership isn't about persuasion. It's not about trying to make people agree with you or proving why your way is the best. The most influential leaders in history didn't convince people to follow them. They simply shared a vision so clear, so compelling, that people naturally chose to be part of it. Persuasion is about trying to get someone to do something. It often involves tactics, reasoning, and sometimes even manipulation. It's an attempt to change someone's mind through argument or appeal. But there's a problem with persuasion. It assumes that people are hesitant or unwilling to follow, so it tries to push them toward a decision. This often backfires because people don't like to feel pressured or controlled. The moment they sense that someone is trying to persuade them, they put up walls. Even if the argument makes sense, they resist because it doesn't feel like their choice. Great leaders operate differently. They don't try to convince. They share what they believe in and let people decide for themselves. They speak with such clarity and conviction that those who resonate with their message feel drawn to it naturally. There's no force, no pressure, just a vision that inspires people to want to be part of something greater than themselves. When John F. Kennedy stood in front of the American people and said, "We choose to go to the moon," he wasn't persuading anyone. He wasn't listing out the pros and cons, trying to prove that space exploration was the right move. He was sharing a vision, one that made people excited about the future. He painted a picture of possibility, of innovation, of human potential. And because of that, people felt compelled to rally behind the mission. They didn't feel forced to believe in it, they wanted to. This is how all great movements begin, not with persuasion, but with vision. When someone speaks with true belief, it creates an emotional connection. It makes people feel something, and feelings are far more powerful than logic when it comes to inspiring action. People don't follow because they are convinced, they follow because they feel a sense of purpose, excitement, or alignment with the vision being shared. Think about companies that have built a loyal following. Apple never persuaded people to buy their products. They never bombarded customers with arguments about why their technology was superior. Instead, they presented a way of thinking, challenging the status quo, making technology more intuitive, putting creativity in people's hands. That vision was so powerful that customers didn't need to be persuaded. They simply wanted to be part of it. Compare that to companies that rely on persuasion. They use discounts, aggressive advertising, and constant messaging, trying to convince people why their product is better. But those tactics only work temporarily. They may get people to buy once, but they don't build loyalty. People don't follow brands because they were persuaded. They follow brands because they feel a connection to what they stand for. The same is true for leadership in any setting. Whether in business, politics, or personal relationships, the most influential leaders don't try to talk people into believing in them. They embody their beliefs so fully and share them so openly that the right people naturally align with them. They don't chase followers, they attract them. This is why leaders who rely on persuasion often struggle in the long run. Persuasion requires effort, argument, and sometimes even coercion. It demands constant convincing. But when a leader shares a vision, it spreads organically. The right people find it, embrace it, and carry it forward because it speaks to something deeper within them. If we look at history, the people who made the greatest impact didn't spend their time trying to persuade the masses. They focused on sharing their vision with such clarity and authenticity that the right people stepped forward on their own. They didn't say, "Here's why you should believe me." They simply said, "This is what I believe." And those who felt the same way followed, not because they were convinced, but because they felt they belonged to something meaningful. Not everyone is meant to understand or agree with you, and that's okay. One of the biggest mistakes people make is trying to win over everyone, trying to get universal approval, trying to make sure every single person agrees with their perspective. But the truth is, no matter how great an idea is, no matter how meaningful a vision may be, it will never be for everyone. And that's actually a good thing. When we try to convince everyone, we dilute our message. We start adjusting what we say, shaping our words, softening our stance, all in an effort to make sure nobody disagrees with us. And in doing so, we lose the very thing that makes our message powerful: its clarity, its conviction, its ability to attract the right people. The most impactful leaders, brands, and movements don't try to appeal to everyone. They focus on speaking their truth clearly and letting the right people find them. Think about some of the most successful companies in the world. They don't try to be for everyone. Apple isn't trying to convince people who love Android to switch. Tesla isn't chasing after people who don't care about electric cars. These companies stand for something specific, and because they are so clear in what they believe, the right customers naturally gravitate toward them. They don't spend time trying to change minds. They focus on deepening their connection with the people who already resonate with their vision. The same principle applies to leadership. The best leaders don't waste time trying to gain approval from those who aren't aligned with their beliefs. They don't water down their message to make it more universally accepted. They speak with clarity, and as a result, they attract people who share their values. This is why the most influential movements in history weren't built by trying to convince skeptics. They were built by inspiring those who already believed in the cause, and those people in turn spread the message further. When we stop worrying about trying to be liked by everyone, we gain something far more valuable: authenticity. When we stand firmly in what we believe, we create a foundation of trust. People can sense when someone is being real versus when they are trying too hard to please. Authenticity is magnetic. It pulls in the right people and allows relationships, whether personal or professional, to be built on genuine connection rather than forced agreement. In any group, whether it's a team, a community, or an audience, there will always be those who align with your message and those who don't. The mistake is trying to win over the ones who don't, instead of focusing on deepening your impact with the ones who do. When you focus on the right people, those who already believe in your vision, you build something stronger, you build loyalty, trust, and momentum. And over time, that momentum has a way of spreading further than any attempt at persuasion ever could. We see this play out in all aspects of life. In friendships, the strongest relationships are the ones built on shared values, not on trying to make someone like us. In business, the most successful companies focus on their core audience rather than trying to appeal to everyone. In leadership, the most effective leaders don't adjust their vision to gain approval, they stay consistent, and the right followers naturally gather around them. Trying to get everyone to agree with us is exhausting and, in the end, unproductive. Some people simply won't see things the way we do, and that's okay. When we stop trying to convince and instead focus on living out what we believe, we find that the right people, the ones who truly resonate with our message, will come to us naturally. And those are the people who truly matter. Too often, people waste their energy trying to change the minds of those who are not open to change. They believe that if they just explain their point well enough, if they find the right words, the right argument, or the perfect proof, they can get others to see things differently. But this rarely works. People don't change because they were convinced. They change because something within them was ready to shift. The more time we spend trying to force change onto others, the less time we have to actually live out what we believe. When we focus on changing minds, we put ourselves in a position of struggle. We engage in debates. We try to correct people. We look for ways to prove our perspective is right. But all of this assumes that people are open to listening in the first place. The truth is, most people are not interested in being told they are wrong. Most people are not waiting for someone to come along and change their beliefs. They hold on to their views because those views give them a sense of certainty, identity, and security. When we try to challenge that, their natural instinct is to resist. But when we shift our focus from changing minds to expressing our purpose, everything changes. Instead of trying to win arguments, we simply live out what we stand for. Instead of trying to get others to believe what we believe, we show them what that belief looks like in action. This approach is not only more effective, but it also frees us from frustration. We stop chasing approval, we stop feeling the need to be validated, and we start focusing on what actually matters: our own clarity, our own conviction, and our own impact. The most influential people in history were not those who went around trying to argue people into agreement. They were those who embodied what they believed so fully that others couldn't help but take notice. They lived their truth so unapologetically that the right people gravitated toward them. Their goal was never to change minds. It was to bring their purpose to life in such a way that those who were ready to listen would find them. Imagine two people, both with a strong belief in something. One spends their time debating, trying to get others to agree with them, getting frustrated when people push back. The other simply dedicates themselves to living out that belief in the most powerful way possible. Over time, which person do you think will make a greater impact? The one who spends energy arguing, or the one who shows the world what is possible through their action? This applies to everything, from leadership to business, from activism to personal relationships. A company that truly believes in its mission doesn't waste time trying to convince skeptics. It focuses on delivering products, services, and experiences that embody its values. A leader who is clear on their purpose doesn't spend time arguing with naysayers. They focus on inspiring those who are already open to their vision. A movement that truly wants to create change doesn't beg people to see things differently. It creates momentum through action, through example, through the undeniable power of a purpose fully realized. People don't follow ideas because they were argued into submission. They follow ideas because they see something they want to be part of. They feel a sense of alignment, of connection, of inspiration. This only happens when we stop trying to control how others think and start focusing on fully expressing what we stand for. When we do this, something interesting happens. The people who are never going to change their minds simply fall away. They are no longer a distraction. And the people who were searching for exactly what we have to offer, they find us. Not because we convinced them, but because we were willing to stand firm in our purpose without demanding that anyone else agree. This is the difference between force and attraction. Trying to change minds is an exhausting uphill battle. But expressing purpose, that's magnetic. It pulls in the right people effortlessly. The most powerful movements, the most influential leaders, and the most impactful ideas never spread through argument. They spread because they were lived so fully and so authentically that people couldn't help but be drawn to them. Your energy is better spent building than debating. There's a trap many people fall into, the belief that if they can just explain themselves better, if they can just argue their point more effectively, they will finally make people understand. They think that winning debates, correcting misinformation, or proving their perspective is right will lead to change. But in reality, most debates don't change minds. They drain energy. They pull focus away from what truly matters. They create frustration, division, and resistance. The more time spent trying to convince people, the less time is spent actually building something meaningful. The most successful people, the most impactful leaders, and the most revolutionary thinkers do not waste their time in endless debates. They do not feel the need to prove themselves to everyone who disagrees. Instead, they direct their energy toward creating something real, something tangible. They build businesses, lead teams, innovate, create, and take action. They don't get stuck in arguments because they understand that action speaks louder than words. When someone is busy building, they don't have time to argue. They are too focused on making progress. They are too engaged in their mission to stop and explain themselves to every skeptic. And yet, ironically, those who build are often the ones who end up making the biggest impact. While others are still arguing over what should be done, builders are already doing it. While others are trying to convince people of a possibility, builders are already bringing that possibility to life. This is why true leaders do not engage in unnecessary debates. They don't waste their energy trying to get everyone to agree with them. They know that progress is not made through argument, it is made through action. They surround themselves with people who believe in the same mission, and together they focus on making things happen. They don't let distractions pull them away from their purpose. History proves this time and time again. The most groundbreaking entrepreneurs did not spend their time trying to argue why their ideas would work. They simply built their ideas and let the results speak for themselves. The greatest movements in history were not won through debates, but through action, through persistence, through the undeniable momentum of something real. The innovators, the pioneers, the disruptors, none of them wasted time convincing others. They showed the world what was possible by creating it. There is something powerful about shifting focus from debate to action. It removes frustration, it eliminates unnecessary resistance, it creates clarity. Instead of worrying about what others think, the focus becomes about what can be built, what can be created, what can be improved. And when progress is made, people take notice. Not because they were persuaded, but because they can see it with their own eyes. In business, this is what separates those who succeed from those who stay stuck. Some people spend years trying to convince others that their idea is valuable. Others simply bring their idea to life, refine it, and let the results do the talking. The best companies, the most innovative brands, do not waste time arguing why they are better. They simply create products, services, and experiences that prove their value. And in doing so, they naturally attract the right customers, the right supporters, the right opportunities. This applies to leadership as well. A great leader does not try to argue their way into earning respect. They do not waste time proving their worth. They lead by example. They show up. They take action. They build something meaningful. And because of this, people follow them, not because they were convinced, but because they were inspired. Even on a personal level, this mindset shift is transformative. Instead of getting caught up in arguments, instead of feeling the need to explain and justify every decision, there is a freedom in simply moving forward. Instead of worrying about changing minds, there is power in focusing on creating impact. The right people will recognize the effort, the right opportunities will come, the right changes will happen, not because of endless debate, but because something real was built. Action is what creates change, not persuasion, not argument, not debate. Action. The time and energy spent trying to convince others could be used instead to create something that speaks for itself. And when that happens, the results become undeniable. When faced with doubt, criticism, or disagreement, the instinct for most people is to respond, to explain, to justify. There is an urge to defend oneself, to make others see the logic, the reasoning, the purpose behind a decision or belief. But in reality, explanations rarely change minds. If someone has already decided not to understand you, no amount of words will change that. If someone has already made up their mind about what they believe, no argument will convince them otherwise. And yet so much energy is wasted in the attempt. Silence, on the other hand, has a different kind of power. It does not seek validation. It does not beg for approval. It does not attempt to force understanding. It simply exists as an unshakable confidence that does not require permission or agreement. Silence shows that words are not needed to prove what is already known. It communicates certainty in a way that explanations never can. This is why the most effective leaders, the most respected individuals, and the most influential figures in history were not the ones who constantly explained themselves. They were the ones who let their actions speak for them. They understood that the need to explain is often a sign of insecurity, of needing others to validate a choice. But true conviction does not need validation. It does not require approval. It stands firm, even in the face of misunderstanding. Silence makes people uncomfortable because it denies them control. When someone argues, debates, or defends themselves, it gives others something to push against. It turns the conversation into a back and forth, a struggle for dominance. But when someone remains silent, when they refuse to engage in pointless explanations, it shifts the power dynamic. It forces the other person to sit with their own thoughts, their own assumptions, their own discomfort. It forces them to question whether they truly understand what they are arguing against. Silence also has a way of revealing truth. When words are removed from the equation, all that remains is action. And action is what truly defines a person. Someone can argue their point endlessly, they can explain their reasoning in every possible way, but in the end, their actions are what speak the loudest. Silence allows those actions to be the only voice needed. This is why those who are truly certain, those who truly believe in what they are doing, do not waste time explaining themselves. They do not feel the need to prove their point to everyone who questions them. They understand that their energy is better spent moving forward rather than arguing in place. They know that real influence does not come from convincing, it comes from demonstrating. Silence is not weakness. It is not avoidance. It is not a lack of response. It is a decision to let results speak louder than words. It is a statement of unwavering belief. It is the refusal to waste energy on those who are not ready to listen. And in that silence, there is more power than any explanation could ever provide. So the next time you find yourself in that argument, in that debate, trying so hard to get someone to see things your way, pause, stop trying to convince, start speaking from belief, start sharing from passion, and watch what happens. Thank you.